Hey, what's going on? It's my nerd world. I'm glad you're here. A Star Wars podcast. All right, on the show this week, Rian Johnson continues to comment about not just the Last Jedi, but also the Rise of Skywalker. A little bit later on in the show, I'm going to save it to talk about it before we get to listener feedback. But spoilers for WandaVision. I won't do them now. I'll give you a fair warning. But the season finale of WandaVision fixed a Rise of Skywalker problem that I had. I know that sounds weird, but it'll make sense when I explain it to you. Plus, Cara Dune is out. Well, who's in? We'll talk about that a bit. Plus, Kenobi casting rumors and also some rumors surrounding Kenobi and Andor that may or may not be legit based off the source. Again, we'll give you details. And plus, as I mentioned, we'll get into listener feedback. I'm so glad you're with the show this week. Let's go ahead and talk some Star Wars, shall we?
It's an instinct. A feeling. The Force brought us together. We're not alone. Good people will fight if we lead them.
People keep telling me they know me. No one does.
But I do.
Long have I waited. And now you're coming together. Is your undoing. Confronting fear is the destiny of a Jedi. Your destiny.
The Force will be with you.
Always.
I'm your host, Jon Justice, and I'm glad you are with my Nerd World of Star Wars podcast again this week. I really do appreciate it, and I hope that you have just as much fun listening as I do recording every single episode. Quick EMBARK note. I have revealed the cover for EMBARK Book 5, The Rocket Queen. I would encourage you to head on over to any of my social networking outlets. So at the My Nerd World, at the Jon Justice, the banners are currently a portion of the cover. Also, if you head on over to my Facebook page, Jon Jon Justice, you can find it there. Also on Instagram, the Jon Justice. But yeah, go check it out. It's creating quite the buzz, and I'm really excited about that. And that was kind of the intention. I did something really unique, and I had a story idea that I was originally going to do in the first 3 stories that I held off on for Book 5. So, EMBARK, The Rocket Queen, Book 5 will be out in ebook and paperback on Tuesday, March 16th. And you can pre-order the ebook right now for $2.99 at Amazon.com. Just search for EMBARK, Jon Jon Justice, and you can see all of my books there. All right, so we got a couple of news items to get to, a little bit of commentary about WandaVision, and I am going to be talking spoilers, so just be aware that if you haven't watched the season finale of WandaVision, you may want to skip past that in the recording when we get to it and hop on over to listener feedback. Before we get to that, though, we do have several different news items to talk about. First off, Soraya Wilson, I keep saying her name, Sarah Wilson. I keep going Soraya Wilson on Twitter. This is the USA Today writer and author who has been conducting the interviews with Rian Johnson and also Daisy Ridley that have been some of the biggest news items the past few weeks on the show. She took to Twitter again and wrote that The Last Jedi director Rian Johnson confirms that there was no pre-existing plan to have Kylo Ren / Ben Solo die in Episode 9. The idea to kill off the character was J.J. Abrams' decision in The Rise of Skywalker. So it sounds like what's happened here is that this author, this writer for USA Today, has been holding back some of the some information from these interviews that she's conducted, which is smart because you can spread out the information a bit, and the interview has a lot more impact that way. I got no problems with that. I think it's cool. It's been really helpful for the show because these interviews have not been made available to the public. So this is what she wrote on Twitter, and I'll run through the thread here. She asked, "Did you know that Ben was going to die when you were making The Last Jedi? Did you know that from the beginning?" And Rian said, "No, I did not know." And then she said she was irritated because she realized that killing Ben Solo was not always the plan. Rian then notices my expression and sign of disgust. Laughing, he asked me what that was for, and I told him that I had a lot of feelings about the ending, and then showed him my Ben Solo deserved better t-shirt, which made him laugh more. He explained that it was very much a full handoff between 7 and 8, just as it was from 8 to 9. Now, I'm going to go back to that in a moment because I think that's really important. Rian did his best to tee up a bunch of things and tried to bring 8 to a point where there were lots of places the story could go. He didn't want to be unfair to the next director and leave a lot of possibilities. He wasn't trying for a specific outcome for the end of the series. But to have lots of dramatic potential for 9. He answered my question again by saying he didn't know whether Kylo would live or die, then quickly corrected himself to say he didn't know whether Ben would live or die, and how the series would resolve. So, I don't know if this does anything for you, if you were frustrated by the ending of The Rise of Skywalker, if this makes you more upset, if this makes you less upset. I'm indifferent to it, and I suppose for me, I'm not surprised. And what I wanted to share in my view of how these films were crafted, for good or bad. First off, we'll start off with the disclaimer that we always put on the show, which is my opinion, but that all art is subjective, right? Everybody has a different view of music and music and films, books. All art is subjective that way. What one person loves, another person can hate. What I want to add, though, is there was this handoff between 7 and 8. And let's assume that Rian Johnson is saying the truth, that this was a handoff between 7 and 8, that there may have been like an arc of where they thought the characters were going to go, but that, J.J. Abrams left the door open just as much as Rian Johnson did to leave it open for Colin Trevorrow, and then subsequently J.J. Abrams when he took it back over. We never would have seen The Last Jedi that many of us have come to love if it hadn't been for the handoff that took place between 7 and 8. I think it's pretty clear that if J.J. Abrams had done Episode 8, it would have been something very different. And I think the evidence is in Episode 9, because I know a lot of people would have gone a different way with Episode 9. I haven't really spent much time thinking that, like, if I were writing the book or directing or writing the screenplay for 9, what I would have done. Maybe I should do that at some point in time, but I haven't really thought about it. I will say that just sort of my gut reaction is, because I'm just such a hopeless romantic, I probably would have had Ben Solo and Rey, ride off into the twin suns together. But as I've mentioned many times, I have no issue with the ending. If I was going to create that ending for Ben Solo and Rey, I would have needed to put in there some sort of dynamic or some sort of plot story element to rectify the fact that regardless of his seduction to the dark side and what may have been influencing Kylo Ren before the Ben Solo turn, he did commit a lot of atrocities in that role, and he needs to be held accountable for that. There's a again, sort of spitballing here, I think there is a fix there where if Ben goes into isolation, right, and Rey goes with him, then maybe perhaps that's a means to go ahead and rectify that. But again, that is me just in the moment thinking about it. But going back to the point I wanted to make is, if that was to truly a handoff, which I believe it was between 7 and 8, and it was truly a handoff between 8 and 9, for me, I fully respect what J.J. Abrams did in the same way that I respect what Rian Johnson did. Now, arguably, I love The Rise of Skywalker. It is currently my favorite Star Wars film for a number of different reasons. I know there's been a lot of negativity around both of those films, and certainly with regard to what Rian Johnson is saying here, and even what Soraya Wilson is saying, she was obviously frustrated to find out that it was J.J. Abrams' choice, that there may have been a different path that could have been taken. But I think there always could have been a different path that could have been taken, regardless of who it was. J.J. Abrams chose to do it, and so if you didn't like the ending of The Rise of Skywalker, then I suppose you can point the finger at J.J. Abrams and Chris Terrio. But, it could have been anybody making those same choices. And it goes beyond that, too, because they did, obviously, Disney and Lucasfilm have a say in this, because they didn't move forward with Colin Trevorrow's vision at all, which I thought would have made a really interesting Star Wars movie. Probably not the best version for episode 9. I have no problems with the sequel trilogy, the way it played out in terms of story. And the more that I watch it, the more that view that I have sort of gets cemented. I love the sequel trilogy. Any complaints that I have, and I do have some, and I'll get to one of them later on in the show, any complaints that I have are really, really surface level stuff that doesn't ruin the experience at all. From a visual standpoint, here's probably my biggest one. And again, it's not even really a complaint, it's just an observation that if I had the opportunity to switch things up, I may have made it a little differently personally. But there is such a stark visual difference between the sleekness of the way A Force Awakens looks versus the way that The Last Jedi looks in the cinematography aspect of it. I'm not talking about the filming itself. I'm not talking about the way that the shots were set up. I'm talking about the actual visual image. When you put them side by side, there is a much deeper, arguably richer look to The Last Jedi than there is to The Force Awakens' sort of crisp and clean look. What's interesting to me, though, is when I watch The Rise of Skywalker, it is, in my opinion, kind of a blending of the two. That is to say that The Force Awakens into The Last Jedi visually, in terms of the color palette and the tone, doesn't match very well, but it matches better going from The Last Jedi into The Rise of Skywalker. But that's a really just visual thing that has nothing to do with storytelling whatsoever. The one thing about The Rise of Skywalker that I thought was interesting versus The Force Awakens when comparing it to The Last Jedi is that I feel that J.J. Abrams did some things in The Rise of Skywalker that to me were very more in line with The Last Jedi than anything that he did in The Force Awakens. For example, and probably the best example I could give, apart from expanding upon the Force bond scenes, which I thought was awesome, is the standoff between Rey on the ground and Kylo Ren in his TIE Whisper. That's a very interesting, almost nonsensical scene to a certain extent that is visually and even emotionally and on an excitement level very dynamic. I mean, the fact that you've got this scene of the two of them and Kylo Ren chasing him down and she flips up in the air, cuts the wing off of, we get a slow motion shot, which is something that, J.J. Abrams, in my view, was brave enough to do because of some of the visual cues that were different in Rian Johnson's Last Jedi film. So, I actually think that The Last Jedi flows a lot better into, and The Last Jedi and The Rise of Skywalker are better paired together than The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi. And it might be part of the reason why I love The Rise of Skywalker so much, because it takes a lot of the elements of what Rian Johnson brought in The Last Jedi and brings them in to The Force Awakens, but it's aided with J.J. Abrams' editing style, where he just makes a movie where I don't want to miss a single scene or shot from the film, because I love the way it's visually set up and the storytelling. TalkShowNerd at gmail.com is the email address if you'd like to comment on this. I'm sure you would. I would love to hear from you as well. Let's move over to a couple more scoops. First off, I'm not going to get into this at all talking about the Gina Carano, Cara Dune situation, except to say that this is coming from that. So I commented on that before. I'm not going to make any more comments on that. However, over at LMR, a source over at Lucasfilm told them that creatives were looking to bring Hera Syndulla as the bridge to connect the Mandalorian universe with Rangers of the New Republic. So the production of Rangers is still a while away. However, the issue creatives were running into is finding time to introduce a new character and connect it to the Mandoverse. Hera was first introduced in the animated Star Wars series Rebels, one of my favorite animated characters, as the pilot of the Ghost, early leader in the Rebellion. Her character has also been included with a brief mention in Rogue One and in the video game campaign Squadrons, where we actually see her. At the time of Return of the Jedi, Hera has achieved the rank of captain and has been part of multiple iconic Star Wars battles. The inclusion of Hera Syndulla in Rangers of the New Republic reduces the time for a backstory and allows the show to focus on newer characters. So look, again, keeping the controversy of what happened to Cara Dune, she's gone, she's not coming back. I am really excited about this possibility. I doubt that they will use the voice actress, which I think would be rad, but they'll probably use somebody different. I don't have anybody top of mind I can think of. I just really, really love that character. And even if she doesn't end up in Rangers of the New Republic, I hope that we end up seeing her in live action, because I just think she's a really interesting character. The way that she was written was really compelling. She's my favorite part, apart from Ahsoka, and as a matter of fact, while I love Ahsoka as a character more than Hera, I think I like Hera more than Ahsoka in the Rebel series in and of itself. So that has me really, really excited. And as I'll get to here after this next bit of news, I'm really excited for what they're going to be doing live action with Star Wars, based off what we're seeing with the Marvel series, the Marvel live action series. I really, really liked WandaVision a lot, and I'll talk about more of that in a bit. I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about Wanda, apart from something that happened in the season finale that, like I said, helped me sort of rectify a problem doing that thing with my fingers that I had in The Rise of Skywalker. But the way they were able to take risks with WandaVision and then still bring it back to make it feel like it was a piece of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, I thought was just sheer brilliance. And there was an emotional weight to WandaVision that I just love. I think it's really going to end up becoming one of my favorite pieces of Marvel live-action content. So, again, we'll talk a little bit more about that in just a moment. One more piece of news, though. This was an exclusive. I believe Deadline was reporting this. Game of Thrones and For Life star Indira Varma is set to join the upcoming Obi-Wan Kenobi series. Star Wars prequel stars Ewan McGregor and Hayden Christensen are already on board for the series. I've talked about this recently and the possibilities of what Hayden Christensen being Darth Vader in the series could mean and how we could see him. Varma's character details are under wraps, as are the plot details on the drama, which is based on McGregor's prequel movie character. Christensen will reprise his role as Darth Vader, as we've just been talking about. It will be taking place between Revenge of the Sith and A New Hope. McGregor also confirmed last month that the series will be directed by Deborah Chow, which we already knew, who directed 2 episodes in the first season of The Mandalorian, and it will use the same technology as The Mandalorian, the stagecraft tech in which the show's detailed SFX backgrounds were projected on to ultra-high resolution screens behind the actors. And then it wraps up talking about how pivotal a character Obi-Wan Kenobi is to the series. Respected stage and screen actress Varma is well known for her small screen roles in the series such as Rome of Game of Thrones, Carnival Row, and most recently ABC's For Life. So I don't have any personal speculation on who she could be playing. It's just fun to see casting, and I enjoyed her time in Game of Thrones, so wanted to share it with you. On top of that, though, there was some other rumors, and this came out from Illuminati, and Illuminati.com has, I guess, from what I've heard, Illuminati has been pretty spot on when it comes to some Marvel leaks and rumors. So they're just now kind of getting into the Star Wars game. They did put out a report, which makes a lot of sense, that Obi-Wan Kenobi would be showing up in the Andor series. What I like about this is, again, this potential of what we heard about a long time ago and what we know is happening within Mando, and that is a crossing of characters from the live-action shows into other live-action shows. So we know that the live-action shows on Disney Plus that are post-Return of the Jedi, being Mandalorian and Ahsoka and Rangers of the New Republic that we were talking about, they are going to be all interspersing together, culminating in a larger event at the end. So it makes sense that the live-action shows that are taking place pre-A New Hope may be doing the same thing. And I'm under the impression that this could possibly also include, and Boba Fett, obviously, Book of Boba Fett in Mando. But I'm under the impression, too, at least based off this news, that if it's true, which makes sense, that if we are going to, in the Lando series, get Donald Glover playing Lando, then it would make some sense that perhaps there's some crossover there as well in those live-action shows that take place between episodes 3 and 4. So, it's just all exciting news. And again, I'm going to use the sort of what Marvel has been doing, and I think that Disney is really learning from that as we head forward into whatever the next iteration of Star Wars content is going to be now that the saga films are finished.
Something inside me has always been there. But now it's awake. And I need help.
All right, so there are some spoilers here. If you have not watched WandaVision yet, I'm going to warn you right now. I'm going to spend a few minutes talking about it, and then we'll be getting into a little bit of listener feedback this week. So, really, really loved WandaVision and what this show did. And I thought the season finale was, the last 2 episodes of WandaVision are just spectacular. I love the emotional weight of what they've done. I love what they did with the Wanda character in essentially giving us a really unique origin story to the Scarlet Witch and leaving sort of these question marks of whether or not she's going to be good or bad. And there was just an emotional weight to it that I thought was really, really cool. However, the thing that I wanted to zero in on was one problem that was never properly explained, at least as far as I have seen. So if you've seen an explanation for this, please reach out to me, either leave a comment up on YouTube or email me, talkshownerd@gmail.com. But when Palpatine at the end of The Rise of Skywalker, and I just went back into the novelized version, and it did not give an explanation there. The one thing that kind of bugged me was when Palpatine discovers that Rey and Ben are a dyad, and he pulls their life force, and he essentially, regenerates himself, renews himself, right? The fact that he had a change in his clothing always kind of bugged me. I always had kind of an issue with that, because unless I'm missing something, and I can only think of one instance where this kind of takes place, and so this is where my headcanon was. But unless we've seen it before, I don't remember in Star Wars seeing sort of clothing manifest itself. Now, again, the only time we've seen that would be in Force Ghosts. So I've always kind of used my headcanon to explain how Palpatine was able to, it's one thing to regenerate yourself and fix your scarred and wrinkled body to bring yourself to a place where you were at your most powerful, which is again the way that I always interpreted why Palpatine looked that way. That may have been what his visage looked like all along, as he was hiding in a younger self in the prequel trilogy. Because there's been some speculation when there is that moment between Mace Windu and Palpatine when he turns, that was it the Force lightning and the dark side energy transforming him, or was it just revealing what he always looked like? But I did have an issue at the end of Rise of Skywalker when he sucks the dyad force, regenerates his body, but he ends up with a bunch of new clothes. Watching WandaVision and seeing her transformation to the Scarlet Witch, in which she magically receives new clothes, I know it sounds really strange, but that's the first thing I thought of was, all right, if we are looking at dark side forces or powers, and I'm not saying that Star Wars is Marvel. That's not what I'm saying at all. I'm just saying that I hadn't spent a lot of time thinking about dark side force powers as being something like magic. And Wanda kind of rides that line, right? If you've watched the show, you know that there was some ambiguity. I love that word. But there was some, at least for Wanda, there was some ambiguity of whether or not she was a witch. And so Agatha was goading her on, saying, no, this is something that you are going to become. Because, Wanda was basically saying, I'm not a witch. I don't do spells. I didn't get my powers from that. And she's like saying, no, you don't understand. This has been written. This is what you are going to become. It in and of itself was kind of a prophecy. So watching WandaVision and seeing that and accepting that in WandaVision made me change my headcanon, going, all right, that adds a little bit more. If you can pass into the Force and bring along Force clothing with you, then perhaps dark side energy can do the same. I think with the Force Ghost energy, too, I had always, again, without knowing if this has been talked about in canon anywhere, please inform me if it has, but I'd always taken that as that sort of a Force Ghost impression of what they were going to look like. So anybody who transforms into the Force that learns that power is going to project an image of themselves for somebody else to see, and in this case, they're wearing clothes as opposed to them just chilling out there in their birthday suits, which you can actually go and use that a bit when it comes to Palpatine as well. He regenerated himself and magically was able to give himself different garbs. So I just thought that was cool. I really loved, again, the season finale of WandaVision, and that little moment, that's what I thought of. I'm like, you know what? That helps me a little bit when watching The Rise of Skywalker go, all right, I can accept that. That works for me. What do you think? Was that just ridiculous? Was that just like the silliest thing that you'd ever heard?
This is not going to go the way you think.
Apparently not.
I need someone to show me my place in all this.
All right, let's dive into some listener feedback. Not a lot this week, but there wasn't a lot going on last week, so I'm not all that surprised. First one comes from Brian Martin, who says this. Some have said that it was a complete missed opportunity to kill a Han off without ever having him on screen with Luke, Leia, and Chewie at the same time. Frankly, I don't know what the big deal is myself. Brian, I'm with you. I have said this many times on many shows throughout these several years that I never personally needed the main characters from the original trilogy in the sequel trilogy. And I certainly didn't need to see them or desire to see them all together again. We had our time with those characters in the original trilogy. And I'm always about moving forward if that's where we're going in the timeline. And so I was always on board with new characters. And I would have been fine if they had jumped so far ahead that we didn't even get the old characters. So, and that's a lot of the reason why I never had any issues with the way that any of these characters were really dealt with. The old trilogy characters. And I think that might play into a lot of people's frustration when it came to The Last Jedi and how Luke was portrayed. So, because I think for a lot of other people, they wanted to see those original trilogy characters and certainly wanted to see them treated differently, right, within the sequel trilogy. So, So yeah, no, I never had an issue with it either. Still don't have an issue, and I don't see myself having an issue with it in the future. All right, Owen Dowd. Actually, I'm going to hold Owen's for last. Let's go to Irene Davis, who writes this. I truly believe that the story of Rey and Ben has the potential to be the greatest love story ever told. Totally agree with you. Driver said he would if Ridley would come back. Again, the idea of doing a Kylo Ren Rey show or two of them, live action in between the timeline of The Force Awakens. The Last Jedi, and you couldn't do one between The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi. That would be a very short series. No, between The Last Jedi and The Rise of Skywalker. They have real chemistry. So many possibilities from filling in the gaps between The Last Jedi and The Rise of Skywalker. As a staunch Reylo, I can see the endless possibilities. Thank you for the show. As always, friend of the show, Irene, and a part of the Nerd World family and proud of it. Thank you very much, Irene, and we're always happy to hear from you and to have you here. All right, last one for the day, for the podcast. Owen Dowd writes this. Honestly, it's a great thing to have speculation again. I'm really happy that they know when to slow down on the releases. It makes us use imagination. WandaVision is awesome. I'm so happy that Disney Plus is doing weekly releases because shows just don't die in a week. Yeah, absolutely. Even with the big villain from the first movie run gone, the options open up. The same thing, I believe, will happen with The Mandalorian. As they continue to make new characters and plots, everything both ties together and makes new content. We may be alluding to the First Order, but there could be a totally different branch of villains introduced in the next season. It's fantastic. Well, and technology-wise, too, it's going to be really interesting to see, because by the time we get to Rogue Squadron, and by the time we get to Season 3 of The Mandalorian, I guess not next year, but the year after, right? Or maybe, no, it is next year. My years are screwed up. We get Book of Boba Fett, and then we get a third season of Mandalorian going into 2022. But the technology, when it comes to what they're using to film these shows, is going to be changing drastically. I expect that any sort of limitations they may have had with the volume and these digital projections, they will only improve upon to the point where you won't be able to tell what they filmed with the volume and what they filmed like a regular film. And it has me really excited for future content. It really does, because I think we have the opportunity now. And then, in fact, I know we have the opportunity now. We have the opportunity now to no longer have the limitations that we used to have with TV projects. And that was always the biggest hurdle, right? I was a big fan of Space. I still am a big fan of the TV show Space Above and Beyond from the 90s. But it's really, really hard to watch because it's TV grade and the effects weren't great. And now we've reached a point where that doesn't matter because the technology has gotten so good. Sure, the end of WandaVision and the season finale, I think you could tell there were some dollar limitations that they couldn't stretch the CGI quite as much as they would have for a theatrical release, but it wasn't bad by any stretch. Man, this is why I've never been more hopeful that, God willing, my EMBARK series can become live action, because we have the technology to do it. And it wouldn't, years ago, if you were looking at a book like I wrote for book 1 with everything that happens in that story, and how epic it is in scope, and the number of things that blow up that are really big. I just don't think you'd be limited. Even early CGI, you'd be limited. But now you could totally do. Yeah, so if you could totally do a story like EMBARK and keep the budget low. So, all right. That's it. Thank you so much for checking out the show this week. I hope that you, I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope wherever you are happy, you are healthy, and you are safe. And we'll be back next week for another episode. Bye.
The Force will be with you, always.
My Nerd World.